Every coursebook includes reading texts and listening exercises. But have you been taking full advantage of them? Do you feel confident enough to design your own reading and listening tasks? I'm Rubens Heredia, one of your Pavilion ELT vloggers, and in this series we'll be looking at different moments in our lessons, thinking about how to make them more effective and, of course, more engaging and fun. And in this video, I'd like to share with you 5 tips to teach listening and reading skills. Want to know how? So come with me. I'm grouping listening and reading into one video because there are many similarities in terms of the way reading and listening lessons are organized and the implication for our learners. They are both receptive skills, so language skills that involve processing the information that reaches us through written medium or a spoken one. Throughout the video, I'll be using the word text to refer not only to written communication like articles, books, and emails, but also to conversations, podcasts, videos, and other types of spoken text. So let's cut to the chase. Tip number 1, focus on specific subskills. Listening and reading are what we call language skills, but they are broad language skills that can be subdivided into smaller skills or subskills. This can be very abstract, so let's compare it to swimming. That's a skill, right? And it can be divided into smaller skills like backstroke, breaststroke, etc. And even those can be divided into smaller skills. In order to swim breaststroke, you need to be able to move your arms in a certain way, for example. The same principle applies to listening and reading. In order to read effectively, you need to be able to master a range of subskills. They include the most basic actions like recognizing sounds or letters to more complex ones like reading between the lines or recognizing sarcasm. If you have taken swimming lessons, you probably spent some time practicing leg movements while holding a floating kickboard, right? This was you developing the sub-skill in order to develop the skill. That's what we try to do when we design reading and listening lessons. Each reading or listening task will help students develop one sub-skill. Some of the most common reading and listening sub-skills are reading or listening for gist. This is the most general understanding of the text, like recognizing the genre or identifying the purpose of the text. Students can also read or listen for specific information, like when they are trying to find facts and figures or recognizing examples and arguments. Students can also read or listen for detail, for example, when they are distinguishing facts from opinions, recognizing connections between ideas, or finding implicit rather than explicit information. If you want to read more about reading and listening subskills, you can check out a post I wrote by following this address, bit.ly/while reading or listening. Tip number 2, ask students to justify answers. Have you ever asked students to check answers in pairs only to see something like this? Number 1, B. 2, C. 3, A. Teacher, finished. Not a lot going on there, is there? Something similar happens if we just elicit the answers from the whole group. We might end up with only one student giving all the answers, or we might not even know whether the students actually understood the text or if they just had a lucky guess. That's where asking students to justify answers comes in handy. Asking students to underline the part of the text that contains the answers, or playing the recording again during answer checking and asking students to tell you to stop when the answer appears are some simple but effective ways to help learners refer to the text to justify the answers. Tip number 3, prepare students for the tasks. There's a difference between teaching reading and listening and testing reading and listening. If you simply show the questions to students and then give them the text or play the recording, are you really helping them read or listen better, or are you just checking how well they already read or listened? If your intention is to teach the skill, it is important that you take some actions before students tackle the text. Actions that will prepare them to read or listen and increase their chances of getting the right answer. Here are some ways in which you can prepare students for the tasks. Give them time to read the questions silently. Ask students to read out the questions. Check understanding of words in the questions. Ask students to predict answers. Help students notice the type of information being asked. Here's my strategy to make sure that I'm teaching rather than testing reading and listening. I always ask myself, what am I bringing to the lesson that students wouldn't be able to achieve on their own if they had access to the text and the answer key? Tip number 4, use authentic materials. I always talk about authentic materials in my videos because I do feel that this kind of texts are powerful tools that we have at our disposal to promote engagement and develop receptive skills. When I talk about authentic materials, I mean texts in English that are produced for the general public, not specifically for language students. The more you know the students, the more you will be able to know what types of texts they have to or like to read, the types of TV shows and YouTube videos they like to watch. And you can bring these types of texts into the classroom, designing reading or listening tasks to go with them. But then you tell me, oh, but my students are mostly at elementary or pre-intermediate level, they won't be able to cope with an article from The Guardian. And you're right. But remember one thing, the article from The Guardian is authentic material, but so are the comments on Kim Kardashian's latest Instagram post, and so are TripAdvisor reviews and apartment listings. There's quite a range of sorts of materials there, and you can choose the types of text that your students will be able to cope with. There's an EOT maxim that goes, grade the task, not the text. And I think Julie Moore explained it quite clearly in an article for Modern English Teacher. As a general rule of thumb, the simpler the input, the more challenging the accompanying task can be. And conversely, the more challenging the input, the simpler the task. The aim of the initial tasks should not be to test the student's comprehension, but to help them in decoding the text. That means careful staging and scaffolding. Now, if you want to really increase motivation, rather than just assuming what types of texts and topics will be interesting to your students, you can actually ask them to choose topics, texts, or videos they want to deal with in lessons. Tip number 5. Help identify misinformation and disinformation. In our current times, one of the most important reading or listening subskill is identifying whether the information we are dealing with is reliable or not. The interconnectedness of our societies and easy access to information mean that we may be exposed to misinformation, information that is inaccurate but as an honest mistake, as well as disinformation, wrong information that is spread on purpose to mislead and manipulate public opinion. According to Nikki Hockley, in a time of global challenges that affects us all, it is especially important that we are able to recognize and stop the spread of false information. The wealth of disinformation and misinformation online in English provides an excellent opportunity for the English language teacher. Course books typically have to reach as many people as possible in completely different contexts, so they often avoid controversy. But if you work in a context that gives you more freedom to explore such topics, learners can benefit from reading or listening tasks that encourage more critical thinking. My advice when dealing with topics like this would be to try to create an environment where students feel free to express their honest opinion, and to remember that it's not about convincing each other, but helping each other deal more effectively with the information that reaches us. I hope these tips will help you develop your students' reading and listening skills and make your lessons more effective. But I want to hear from you. What kind of activities do you like to use to deal with reading and listening? Share your own tips in the comments below. You can also contact me on all social media at WhatIsEOT. Keep learning and keep teaching.